Welcome to Feminist Question Time, brought to you by Women's Declaration International, the leading global organization defending women's sex-based rights against the threats posed by gender identity ideology. First, congratulations and well done to all the women marching in the UK today to get the April Supreme Court ruling implemented. Many of us have been active feminists since the 1970s or even 1960s. We were not surprised when this new attack on women came along, and we have not changed our analysis. In 2018, we wrote a declaration on women's sex-based rights, which lays out our position. It's been signed by over 39,000 people from 160 countries and is supported by 547 organizations. To promote the declaration and sex-based rights for women, we have volunteer activists, including country contacts from every continent. Please join us. You can also become a member of WDI to help our work by volunteering or donating. Please go to info or please email info@womensdeclaration.com or find your country contact on our website, which is womensdeclaration.com. This Zoom is a women-only webinar. We ask men to watch later on YouTube. We have subtitles. If you'd like subtitles in English, press the subtitle button and you can make them small, medium, or large. Our program today will be Sue England from Germany and the UK, Pallavi Devulapalli on why I signed the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights, and then later, we will have the Honorable Jocelynne A. Scutt from the UK talking about when a woman's body is not her own, regulating women through abortion law. And if there's time afterwards, we'll have some video of some news clips. So first, Sue England will be talking about the great global birth rate drop, how it has arrived, and how women are changing our world. Sue is a British lawyer based in Germany. She specializes in human rights law and gives regular seminars, human rights law for non-lawyers. She has also focused on demographics, essentially how birth and death rates are changing and how this relates to the Declaration. This is important, especially in the way governments and the media respond to women's situation in the world. So with that, I will hand it over to Sue. Welcome, Sue.
Hello, thanks, Dara. Thank you. Yes, hello this afternoon, wherever you, or even morning, wherever you are. I'm a human rights lawyer, and I usually talk about law, but I moonlight in demographics because this is a very important issue. What's happening to birth rates, death rates, attitudes towards the population rising, sinking now, in fact, in this case, because it's all women just get talked about around us. It's an issue, but excuse me, it's something really important for women. And the Declaration talks about our sex-based rights. It talks about motherhood being an exclusively female experience. It talks about our right to have sex-based political representation, and yet probably most people are very aware at the moment there's constant things in the media and other places saying, oh, we're not having enough babies, we are not having enough babies. Well, actually, that's women are not having enough babies. I know men may have a certain amount to do with it, but women are not having enough babies. And when it's talked about in this way, it's always sort of on the basis that somehow women have got to be controlled in some way or encouraged in some way, or they're doing something wrong, because we've now got a problematic situation. But women are right in the center of that problematic situation. They are the people who are having the babies. They are the sex that is having the babies. So if, Tara, now you could bring up my slides, I'm going to throw quite a lot of statistics at you because things are changing a lot. Okay. So here is my first slide, and the heading of the talk generally is the Great Global Birth Rate Drop has absolutely arrived. And where's this coming from? Well, from women, and women are changing our world. Now, most people will be aware, particularly from what's said in the media, for 200 years or so, fertility rates are falling around the world for human beings. That means, in this case, women. It started, in fact, in the US about 200 years ago, and it spread all around the world, flooding through Europe, then flooding into Asia, flooding into Latin America, finally flooding into Africa. So this is called the Great Demographic Transition. Until about 5 years ago, that was the focus that everybody was making. Well, fertility rates are dropping all over, and it's going everywhere. Everywhere, even where birth rates are high, it's dropping. But now we are firmly in the situation where this birth rate drop is reducing populations. And it's been talked about for a while, like in this way of, oh, we've got to have more children, we've got to have more children. Somehow we've got to have more children because this is a problem. But suddenly we're in a new situation. Over the last 5 years, all these predictions have changed because the whole thing has speeded up. So 5 years ago, the UN, when they took all these sort of projections and things together, they predicted that the world population would keep on going up to 10.3 billion in 2084, and then it would start reducing. Now, suddenly, they've had to reassess all this because it's going to be faster, and the top level, the highest amount of the population is going to be lower. They're now talking about 2064 topping out at 9.6 billion. That's a huge change in the projections they've been making only over a 5-year period. So this trend is getting faster and faster, and they were a bit surprised. And so just to put it into context, currently, as of this month, there's 8.25 billion people in the world, and it's probably going to go up another 1.3 billion, but not another 2 billion. Okay, next slide, please. Right. So, as you all know, this is all put in the context horrors. We're going to have a population implosion. In other words, in many countries already, but eventually in the whole world, we're going to have fewer people. And I take Elon Musk at random because lots of people have been saying very much the same thing all the time. Low birth rates will end civilization. I suppose this is his excuse for why he's got so many children. So it's pushed endlessly. It's pushed endlessly. And we've known about the reducing birth rates for some time. So, for example, when I was first studying this, since the 1980s, European funding pushed towards universities and things said endlessly, find us some pro-natalist government policies which will work. In other words, get the women to have more children. Well, they did realize by about 2005, none of these policies will work because whatever they did, they're not convincing women to have more children. And the birth rates are dropping and dropping and dropping. Individual women are having fewer children, and more women are not having children as well. The number of childless women is going up. So, for example, Hungary sort of took this up seriously. They spend 6% of their GDP on giving sort of subsidies for people to have children. It's not working. France is the only country in the world where they've had pro-natalist policies for 120 years, but they are probably at their total limit 1.8 children per woman. And they don't think anybody would ever manage to push it any higher than that. But France has been doing it for 120 years. And all the other countries are way behind that. So let's look at the sort of rates that the governments, when they're looking at this, can be looking at. Tokyo has currently 0.99 children per woman, and Bogota in Colombia 0.91, even less, a Latin American country. So, next slide, please. Now, these figures are based on a generally accepted sort of scientific measure. The replacement level per woman needed for a stable population in an individual country or worldwide, without migration coming, say, into that country, is 2.1. Every woman must have 2.1 children. That's because a lot of children don't reach adulthood and therefore the situation where they can start having children. So I'm afraid there's a bit of slippage. It's not 2, it's 2.1, but it depends on how bad or good your health services are. We don't need to worry about that technical detail. And of course, that's 2.1 for every woman. So if, as common now in some European countries, say only 85 or 90% of women have children, the ones who are having children would be having to have on average more than 2.1. This is becoming increasingly rare, that situation, women having 2, 3, or 4 children, for example. So how many children are women having throughout the world now? For the whole world, it's 2.25 from last year, for the whole world. And of course, many countries are much, much lower than that, even though some are higher. So what are we looking at for this continuing trend, this quickening trend? The total global fertility rate, as they call it technically, in other words, saying women, the number of women in your country, the fertility rate for your per woman for your country, is projected now to reach this 2.1 per woman on average by probably 2050. That's only 25 years away. So can we have the next slide? So why is this going faster than was expected even 5 years ago? Well, there's basically been a fertility collapse all around the world, all around the world, depending on whether you were looking originally a few years ago at the average being 3 or the average being 5 or even 8 in some parts of Africa. There is a collapse in fertility. It's going down and down and down. And so we're now in a situation come upon us quite quickly that over half the countries in the world, there's 193 countries in the world, over half now have below 2.1 children per woman. And this has gone up from 40%, so it's now 50%, but it was 40% in 2020. It's accelerating. It's very pronounced in large nations, populations with large population, like China. Since 2022, the Chinese population is falling, and it's expected to fall by 45% over the next 50 or 60 years. China is no longer the most populous country in the world. In India, the same effects are happening, although slightly slower. But India is now the most populous country in the world. Growth is, in terms of having more children, is concentrating in low-income areas of the world. So Nigeria is still adding a lot of people. There are countries that are adding a lot of children. But in high-income countries, it's declining about 0.5% annually. So that's a big decline. Can we look at our news and the next slide, please? So I mean, why is this happening? And let's put it in the context of women keeping their sex-based rights, focusing on motherhood as exclusively something that happens to women, and that women should be having reproductive integrity. In other words, we shouldn't have any policies which are forcing women to have children when they don't want them. And the fact for increasingly women around the world, they have been much more able to choose how many children they're having is why this drop is happening. And that's why I say women are changing the world, because they've now got the freedom to decide much more how many children they have. And their answer to that is, now I'm free, I'm going to have fewer. And what are the essential causes? Well, better contraception for women all over, and women are using that. Women have much better education all around the world, and women are using that in all sorts of ways. But this education that they have now is encouraging them not to have children. Another big trend now is that there are much higher costs if you have children in cities. And in the whole world, the population is moving from rural areas into cities, even as the population is increasing as well. So it's more expensive in cities, there's smaller amounts of space, it's very expensive to get children educated and to provide enough, living space from them. And this is happening all over, whether it's happening in some African countries or whether it's happening here in Bavaria, where I live, a big German state. But the number of people in the countryside is reducing, and all the cities are increasing their population. There's also a change because of marriage postponement, which comes with education as well, and also cultural shifts. And wherever women are, the later they have children, the less time they have in their reproductive life. You simply can't have that many children if you start later. And we know this trend is all over the world. So that in itself is knocking through into women controlling their fertility, but by having not being forced into having a large number of children because they don't start so early. There's an interesting one, which is only a tiny effect yet, but in some countries now, they have found statistics which say because boy-child preference is dropping all over the world, this is a really good thing that's happening, but I won't start going into it. It deserves its own presentation. In some countries, they've crunched the numbers and they're finding that if parents have a girl, they're far more likely not to have any other children. Now, this is a complete reversal from the idea that, you kept on having children until you got the boy. Well, that's actually changing around and going to a certain extent in the other direction. People are very happy, much happier now to have girls. And there's a lot of families where once they've had a girl, they definitely decide they don't want any more. And finally, as you might think, well, life expectancy is still rising in most parts of the world. And this does add people. So you're around for longer, so you get counted into the population statistics for longer. But this effect isn't enough to offset low births. And that's why not only do we have countries where there's a very low birth rate, we actually now have countries where there's a higher death rate than the birth rate. And so the population is getting smaller for two reasons. In other words, there are fewer new children being born, but also the number of children being born doesn't even equal the number of people in that country dying in that year. And that's despite increased life expectancy. So, next slide, please. There are also what you might call, oh, can we just go back one? There we are. Right, okay. Sorry, next one on, please, from this. Right. There are also some regional issues because this does vary a lot from region to region. It's all down, but of course, we know some regions are still higher. But let's just look at some of the specific things for different regions. In China, there was what was called this one-child policy. It was never one-child policy, but there was considerable pressure on people and women in particular not to have children. They also reduced the birth rate because of their very, very intense and strongly policed COVID lockdowns. And that's why now in 23, Chinese women are basically only having one child on average. In East Asia, the rates of birth are really, really low too. There's one particular reason is a hyper competitive education system. Children being sent to cram schools, this is very expensive because parents are paying for it separately. And people saying, well, we've got no time for many kids. We have to focus on just the one, our time and our money. In Europe, this has come about through austerity as well, the gig economy, making people's livelihoods insecure, and also the delayed parenthood thing very strongly. And in Latin America, this is a continent where rapid urbanization is taking place in particular, and also what they wonderfully call the soap opera effect. Sort of culture in Latin America now shows all these soap operas, and you only have two children. This is now considered to be the ideal family. It's probably a boy and a girl, but that's the way we've moved on from earlier cultural ideas about what a family consists of. Maybe the soap opera producers can't afford that many actors, so they've just decided to reduce it all to children to be performing in these things. I don't know. So can I have the next slide? So women are changing the world. It's going to happen. We're going to go in so many countries into declining population sizes. And eventually, as I mentioned in an earlier slide, the whole world will. We will peak in terms of children, and the whole world will start dropping. But at the moment, it's already happening in a considerable number of countries anyway. So it's on your doorstep, it's in your country. The decline is absolutely structural. It's voluntary because women's lives have changed and they have far more power over it. But this power hasn't persuaded them to have more children, rather than the opposite. And I repeat, it's accelerating. It's really accelerating, and governments, commentators are being caught by surprise over all of this. Even 5 years ago, when I did a few demographic presentations, it wasn't accelerating at this rate. It's a real change. And also, it's now becoming self-reinforcing in ultra-low fertility countries, which they're talking about it, where a total fertility rate is 1.4 or so. And so many countries are. Because if you only have 1.4 children per woman, those 1.4 children have to produce the numbers of children, which mean that the population reduces. And we've had that in Spain, we've had that in Italy, and even other European countries for some years now. 1.4 children per woman, the next generation can't be very large because nobody is going into having more children. And those 1.4 children would be having to have 4 children on average per family, and they're absolutely not. So next slide. I'm seeing comments coming up on the screen. Anyway, well, we haven't got time today to even begin to sort of look at what this is going to mean, but I can assure you that governments now are suddenly shocked awake by all of this. They're suddenly starting to talk about it. And the old tropes of, well, we've got to get the women to breed more, are suddenly looking impossible. You're just silly if you say that. So they're turning their minds to what we're going to have to do about it. And I mean, we don't know. We don't know what we've got to do about it. But women must take control of this situation. And what are a few of the obvious issues? We're going to have much older populations. We know we were having that anyway in most countries, but it's definitely coming big time. We are going to have much greater global regional differences. Japan already has more than 50% of its population over the age of 50, and they're living with it. Sub-Saharan Africa, right at the other end, it remains youthful. Under 20% of their populations are over 50, even by 2050. But this demographic change, this reduction, is exacerbating the differences in regional global terms. We're going to have far fewer children. We're going to have some added costs of looking after more older people. But of course, we're going to have reduced costs because we're going to not having so many children from 1 to 20 dependent and having to be looked after. That's got to be sort of set in the balance on the other side. We're going to have more older people capable of working, including in paid work. Let's be clear about it. And we're going to have higher retirement ages, and that is slowly happening to a certain extent. But it's a little bit problematic because, of course, the more this trend continues, older people become a higher number of the voting population, and they tend not to want to have higher retirement ages or reductions in pensions. But we're facing this now. I mean, we can't ignore it. It's not something that's sort of going to happen sometime. It's happening now. Next slide, please. Right, and another important question, and I am coming to an end now. When will females begin to outnumber males? Well, we're looking at 2086. This is further away than you might think, because, of course, in many countries in the world, and the biggies are China and India, large quantities of girls were aborted or killed or when once they'd been born or not taken to hospital or anything like that. So there was a considerable imbalance having more men than women. And therefore, in many countries, this meant a huge skew in the voting populations. In India, it was quite difficult for women to have power because there simply weren't that many women when you went to the polls on one person, one vote. There were far fewer women. But the tipping point is now coming, and it's going to be 2086. Okay. So, and then up by 2100, sorry, yeah, 2100, it'll definitively more women in the whole population than men. There are already huge regional variations, so you've got to count that into your political system. In high income countries in Europe, there are already more women than men, and in Russia, it's even 106 females per 100 males. And it is, as I've said already, so I must finish soon, these male skewed ratios for the voting population will gradually balance out, and men will stop having advantages in these countries on the sheer power of the number of their votes. Next slide, please. Okay. So I was already talking about voters, but the last slide was actually about the number of men and women in the population. Here is having more voters. 2059 or probably 4 years earlier because of the escalating for the faster fertility decline. Okay. Why is this? Because there is this natural birth ratio that you have more boys born in any population, because basically more boys die in the womb or after birth in childhood. And then the amounts normally balance out by about 16, 20 or so. But the mortality gap for boys is that there's more boys die than women. And then this accelerates again after 50 or 60. Women in every society in the world normally outlive men by 5 to 7 years if they get born and they can survive childhood. So by 60 plus, women are already outnumbering men 10% globally today. So that means a large elderly female voting population. And the 18 plus population is pulled into a female majority as soon as the aging wave outweighs any youth bulge. And of course, there is an aging wave because people in general throughout the world are living longer. So there's one more slide. Can we have the last slide? So just to put it all in final context, in Africa still, women on average over the whole continent, although it varies a lot over Africa, are still having 4 children. In Asia, in the whole of Asia, it's 1.9 on average. So that's below replacement rate, although there are some countries in Asia where the levels are still high. The lowest continent is Europe. Women on average are having 1.5 children each. And even in Latin America, where this effect is happening extremely fast, it's 1.8. And in North America, in fact, which thought that they were immune to all this and they would continue having 2.1 children plus, and they could ignore and laugh at Europe, for example. That was very much the sort of thing that was being said 15 years ago. It's now 1.6. So that's the end of my slides, and that's effectively the end of my talk. I'm doing this to give you the figures and lots of things to think about. I'm not providing solutions or even any more predictions about what we as societies need to do. But that's the situation we are in now. We have to look at falling populations. And we as women in our societies, and with our increasing political power, we need to make very sure we are keeping our sex-based rights, that it's fully understood that it is women who have children, and that we should not be being pushed around by anybody who starts telling us how many children we should have. And we must make sure that we are fully involved in deciding what is going to happen next and how countries are going to be dealing with this new situation, because it's absolutely crucial to women where we go from here. So thank you.
Thank you, Sue. That was so incredibly informative. There's a lot of gratitude in the chat. Thank you so much for that information that we all definitely need if we're going to make informed and intelligent decisions, as you say. So one thing that came up in the chat was some surprise at the declining boy-child preference. Now, I know you said that's a talk for another day. I get it. I just want to ask if you know, and if you don't, that's fine. But if you know, how do we know that? How can that be measured?
Um, Simply by birth rates in countries like, say, India, where you had these areas of India where they're saying, well, hang on, we counted the figures last year, and there was 117 boys born for 100 girls. So, I mean, it's quite simple. You can actually tell it from the figures. But then, of course, they're also doing a lot of surveys and asking people why. What's your attitude towards this? Do you still feel very strongly that boys are more important than girls, or that you must have more children until you get a boy, for example? And then the interesting figure I told you was by they're asking in America and parts of Europe, say, um, oh, the same questions, and people's attitudes are changing hugely. And they've also discovered, for example, that very often in these fertility clinics, you ask people and they're sort of very neutral about it. And of course, people who wanted to kill baby girls would be sort of very neutral about it. But they're now finding that if you ask people who go to fertility clinics, they say, oh, well, I'm egal, well, equal, I don't mind. Do we have a boy or a girl? But actually, when they've come to make the decision, they're 80% in favor of having a girl.
That is fascinating. All right, thank you
Mhm.
so much, Sue. Now we will hear from Pallavi. Pallavi was born and grew up in Hyderabad, India, and came to Britain to travel, broaden her horizons, get postgraduate training, and to have an adventure. She ended up staying and worked as a GP and got involved with various environment related issues locally in her quote unquote free time, finally joining the Green Party due to concerns over the environment and biodiversity decline. Pallavi was the Green Party parliamentary candidate for Southwest Norfolk in 2020 and 2024 and appointed Green Party Health and Social Care spokesperson in 2022. In this role, she became fully aware of the powerful trans lobby within the party. Expelled from the party in June of this year, following her attempts to get the party to move away from unscientific, misogynistic ideology and policies. Welcome, Pallavi.
Thank you so much, Cara. Thank you for having me.
So we'll just have a chat, everyone. Pallavi has not been asked to prepare a talk, so we thought we would just hear from her about her experiences. So can you please tell us a little bit about your professional background and how you got to be a spokesperson for the Green Party?
Sure. So I studied medicine. I was a doctor when I came to the UK, and then I did my postgraduate training in the UK, became a GP. But right from very early on in my life, I've always been interested in environmental things. I had a natural sort of concern for what I was seeing around me, which was basically destruction of nature. So I kind of informally supported lots of things, as soon as I had a bit of agency from my teenage years onwards. And it was, as I kind of became a mom, I kind of it became more acute and more painful to me, and I started to become really worried about where the world was headed. So I started to become active in a very non-party political way. We formed a community group, and we were doing like various things to raise awareness and try and bring the community together, go for kind of tree plantings and low carbon ways of living. And eventually that then kind of my involvement increased, and I joined the Green Party to kind of because I realized that the people in power weren't doing enough. We weren't moving fast enough. So that kind of drew me into party politics. And the Green Party was an obvious fit because I thought, okay, well, if anyone's going to do something about the environment, it's going to be them. So I joined the party, being pretty blind to what had been going on. And for a couple of years, for a few years, I was fairly uh, laid back member. I wasn't particularly active. I was a local member, just canvassing locally and stuff like that. It's only when I became party spokesperson and I became the party health spokesman in 22. And I mean, obviously, I was a GP by then, well established within the NHS. I'd been a board member for the commissioning group, so I had lots of experience within healthcare, both as a provider but also as a commissioner, and various aspects of it. So I guess I was a pretty natural selection for the spokesperson role. So they took me, and I really enjoyed it. I was helping develop party policy, but I could not ignore the fact that there was something very strange going on within the party, where there was this extremely sort of powerful lobby of trans activists who were pushing for policies like, that. So, I went to a conference one year, I think it might have been 2023, where the deputy leader stood on stage and shouted, "Trans women are women, trans men are men." And it was this kind of, this rhetoric and this kind of unquestioning, you had to accept it to be within the party. There was this unwritten rule that dissent was not going to be allowed, that you weren't allowed to express an opinion on this. This
So
was fact. This was it.
let me ask you a question to clarify, and then we'll go on.
Yeah.
Before you joined the Green Party, were you aware of this issue, or were you sort of in the dark about it?
I was vaguely aware. I mean, obviously, being a GP, you had the odd patient who it was just beginning at that time. And I'm in a fairly rural kind of area in England. So we're not London, we're not at the head end of things, if you like. Things take a little while to reach us. So I was vaguely aware I might have had, and actually during my commissioning years, I did come across one patient who was particularly aggressive and verbally vicious, actually, to one of my colleagues because he wasn't getting his hormones from his GP. So I knew, and I knew the medical side of things, but I don't think I'd quite twigged that this was such a big deal, and that actually so much of our political movements were captured by this ideology. I don't think I quite gathered that. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so back to your presence at the Green Party conference in 2023, and people were yelling.
Yeah. So it was on stage, this guy was shouting and there was cheering and kind of general kind of feeling of, I don't know, victorious kind of celebration of this really sort of contrarian idea that trans women are women and trans men are men, which of course they're not. And I'm a GP, I've studied biology, I've studied medicine, I've studied the human body. There is absolutely no way that you can change somebody's sex. A man cannot ever become a woman. A woman can never become a man. And no matter what you do to it, you can pump them with hormones, operate on them, create false appendages and all sorts, but that it doesn't change biology. And it was just so disheartening and also kind of frightening, actually, to see that on stage and this general kind of atmosphere. I wasn't bold enough then to speak up, and I've been completely overwhelmed and overridden anyway. But what I did do was I took that away and I started to kind of quietly campaign behind the scenes. So there used to be this forum called Green Spaces within the party. And because I was spokesperson, I was kind of trying to be honorable and not say anything in public against party policy. So I held my tongue in public, didn't say, I think this is complete nonsense. But within party circles, I was speaking up, and I said, and then the Cass review happened. So Dr. Hilary Cass is a pediatrician who led a review, which was actually commissioned by the Conservative government. She completed the report after the elections, so it came in with a new government, was installed, and basically came out with some really conciliatory approaches towards transgender healthcare for children and teenagers, where she didn't even sort of say the whole thing was nonsense. What she did say was the evidence for any treatments for young people is non-existent or extremely poor. Trials have not been done properly. We don't know what the long-term effects of these so-called treatments are. And a lot of these children, more than 90% of them, have other problems, which are then causing them to believe that they're in the wrong body or whatever, and they need help with all of that. So they need help with their social situation. They might have been abused. They need help with their mental health. They might have neurodiversity issues. And she basically said they need holistic care. That's where the effort needs to be. And we need to pause, sort of this conveyor belt of somebody expressing a bit of gender confusion, and then straight away they put on this conveyor belt of, oh, here you go, have your example, have your sort of one-off, sometimes it was as cursory as a 20-minute interview or meeting with a specialist, and that was it. Next thing you know, they were on hormones, and their gender dysphoria was being affirmed, this affirmed in quotation marks. And these were children. We're talking about children here, but children who basically hadn't even grown. Some of them hadn't even reached puberty. They'd never experienced anything, like a normal bodily, a functioning adult body. So the villainy of this cannot be overstated, in my opinion. Children look up to us. Someone's got to be the adults in the room. You can't go around telling a child, if a child wants to put their hand in a fire, you don't say, oh, great, you've got this wish, let's help you do it. We just don't do that. We've got to be the adults. We've got to say to them, yep, you're having these feelings. It's okay. We can hold those feelings. You can change your dress, appearance, whatever else, but don't do anything permanent. Grow up first. Grow up. We will support you in every other way, give you the mental health support, social support, all the rest of it, help you to grow up. Let's have a conversation at a later date. That's all she was saying. And I was pushing really hard within the party to say, look, guys, we've got to support this because it's a really good review. She didn't go so far as to say trans medicine was a complete nonsense. She didn't say anything antagonistic like that. She was very careful in her language and very kind of aware of the politics and the very heated kind of social milieu in which she was kind of producing the report.
And
So,
there are people in the chat mentioning that some people were very unhappy with her for not going that far.
oh, absolutely, absolutely, and she was very aware of that. So she was trying her best to be this kind of, to make everyone happy. She was conciliatory. She put out this thing, and really, you had to be a complete ideologue to disagree with what she was saying. Just out and out there. So I was pushing really hard behind the scenes, saying to the party top brass, we've got to accept this. And every other political party had finally or reluctantly said, yeah, we'll go along with this, with this review, and we'll accept the recommendations. The Greens finally put out a really weak statement on social media supporting CAS review. It was a really weak statement, not at all something that, I would have wanted, but it was something. And it was something along the lines of, we accept it, we'll work with it. Within hours, it was taken down. The backlash was furious behind the scenes, and of course the one particular lobby group within the party is also called a special interest group, the LGBTQI plus group, were quite open about their opposition to the CAS review, and they were, basically spouting a statement every day about how terrible it was. And almost trying to make out that they were speaking on behalf of the party, which they weren't, of course. The party itself, though, withdrew their statement. And when I questioned it, they said, we can't reach, we can't come together on this. So we're going to have to leave it. We're not going to have a statement. We're not going to have a position on this matter. So that was really frustrating. But then I carried on, challenging them behind the scenes. And I can only assume, and then we had the hustings. The general election happened in 24, where I was sort of in hustings with several other candidates of all various political persuasions. And I was asked, what I thought about all the transphobia in society, about how terribly trans people are being treated. And as it happened, I think I was the last person to get asked that question because the chair was trying to be fair and give us all turns. And they all said basically waffly, woolly things, which didn't say very much at all. And when it came to my turn, I said, I think it's overstated. I said, I don't think most people are transphobic or anything at all. I don't think they think about trans people. I can't remember the exact words of what I said, but I said it's overblown. I said it's a mischievous agenda that is trying to make out there's a problem when there isn't. People usually want to live and let live, and there isn't this great kind of animosity towards any group of people in British society from where I'm sitting. And I talk to a lot of people every day. I wasn't saying that flippantly. I speak to hundreds of people, both professionally, both in my work as a GP, but also as a counsellor. So I'm a district counsellor, which involves coming in contact with lots of people. I go to parish council meetings. I meet people on the streets. They write to me. You're a very public figure locally, within the area. And I said, I don't see any hate. And then I went on to say that biology is a real thing and nobody should try and make out that anyone's changing sex. I said, that's not correct. So, my goodness, nothing happened. actually a lot of good things happened. A lot of people came up to me afterwards, women, but also men, who said how relieved they were to hear a politician speak sense. They were so pleased. I gained a lot of followers and votes that day from that hustings. One woman actually volunteered to leaflet for me, and she leafleted her entire village for me on the back of that. So it was really nice. And for a couple of months, I heard nothing. And then 2 days before national conference, I got an email saying I'd been suspended from the party.
That was this year.
No, this was last year.
Okay.
24. So 2 days before conference, email says I've been suspended from the party immediately. It was a no-fault suspension pending investigation. And, they were going to investigate it. But while I was suspended, I couldn't have anything to do with the party. I couldn't speak in an official capacity to party members. I couldn't be the spokesperson. I couldn't do any social media tweets or anything at all. And I couldn't attend local party gatherings, meetings rather, or anything, to do with the Green Party.
Had you been scheduled to speak at the conference?
No. As it happened, I was heavily involved with health policy, but as it happened, and they couldn't have known that, but I wasn't going to go to conference just because my son was going to university that weekend. And there was no way I was going to, he's my baby, my youngest, and there's no way I was going to miss that. So I was going to go to Bristol to be with him. So, but they didn't know that. And I think the timing was not a coincidence. They were so, so, so frightened that I would be at conference and I would be speaking to members and influencing them and speaking against all their ludicrous ideas. So that's what happened. The suspension then, interestingly, just went on forever. So there was no investigation. Nobody ever came back to me. Nobody lifted the phone up to speak to me and ask for my version of things. All I got was, I was sent the complaint done by an anonymous complainant, had sent them what I'd said at the hustings. And on the basis of that, the regional council decided that they had to suspend me. There was no interview, no questioning, nothing official came from anyone. And then in December, my friend hosted a Christmas gathering at his house, and phoned me to invite me to come along. Now, he's also the convener of the local Green Party. And when he rang me to invite me, I said, you do realize I'm suspended. I'm supposed to go to party gatherings. He said, no, this is not just a party gathering. It's also a personal one. It's at my house. I can invite who I choose to invite. Please come. And I'd known him for years, him and his wife. So I went along. And somebody then reported that I'd attended a party activity while suspended. And they used that as the reason to expel me permanently from the party 6 months later. So this is a story.
It's just amazing. How was the party? The Christmas party?
Weird, because I could see 1 or 2 people giving me shifty looks. Most of them really happy to see me. A lot of them had communicated with me in between saying they missed me, because I'm one of 2 councillors, from our local party. So, it's not as if it's got a huge presence. We were really trying to, ratchet up kind of support for the party and kind of, build it up to be a tour de force in the area. So I was very well known, and there was just such a sense of loss that I wasn't part of their meetings anymore. And then to be told, months later that they'd expelled me. Again, nobody ever spoke to me. In all this time, nobody from this party disciplinary committee or regional council or anyone officially picked up the phone to speak to me. Not once.
So what have things been like since you've been expelled? Do you have any ability to appeal that decision, or would you even want to?
Well, that's the thing. I don't want to anymore. I kind of, when they expelled me, and obviously, joining a political party is like taking a bus to your destination. You take the one that takes you closest to your destination. And when I joined the Green Party, I thought that's the one that's taking me closest to where I want to get to. But since being expelled and looking around and looking at what else was going on with them, I just find I have so many differences with them that I'm not interested anymore. I can't speak for them. I don't want to defend their policies anymore. I don't want to be associated with them. And they're digging their heels in more and more and more with this whole trans thing as well. So there's no integrity in the party from what I can see. And, I don't think I can change it. I tried. And I don't want to be part of a party that has no integrity, that doesn't actually care for the good of the people. And I'm actually afraid of them getting into positions of power. because of the way that they have no interest in safeguarding, no interest in looking after children's health, or well-being, no acceptance of the truth that lives are being shattered by their trans ideology. I can't have that on my conscience, and I don't want to have anything to do with them.
Yeah. There's a question in the chat, which is, where do you think all this stuff came from? What's driving it?
So I thought about this, and people have said to me as well, there's this weird idea that it's all driven by the pharma lobby, the big pharmaceuticals, because they want to drive up sales of their hormones, and also driven by, evil doctors who want to basically make lots of money by doing all these fake surgeries and kind of, altering people's bodies. I'm not convinced. I think some of it may be coming from porn, actually. I think there's a huge number of people who get kicks out of AGPism. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone. It's autogynephilia, where men get high on presenting as women, behaving like women, and getting others to see them as women. I think it's actually the root of this. The evil is actually in a sort of a fetishism and porn. It comes from there, and I think pedophilia is part of it as well. So it's I think the core of it is actually very deep and evil. But of course, it then from there, I think it started from there, and then it spread into the social contagion. And it tapped into a lot of our Western liberal kind of ideas of wanting to be seen to be kind and inclusive. These are like the big buzzwords. So this then tapped into this guilt that a lot of Western societies, especially people on the left, feel for their colonial past, which are undoubtedly horrific. Countries have been horrible in the past to other countries and nations and peoples. So there's this kind of sort of idea that we have to be kind, and then they're kind of bending over backwards trying to be kind. And this then kind of all clarity goes out the window. And in this huge desire to be kind and inclusive, they're kind of then thinking this is the kind thing to do. I think this is sort of, my kind of jumbled understanding.
No, that's really great. We have the Honorable Jocelynne Scutt here, so we'll be turning to her in a minute. But I'm just curious, as someone who has studied for 10 years, I've studied the links between pharma and medical supply companies and trans, and I've also studied the links between porn and trans, and I'm pretty familiar with all of this stuff. But I'm curious, in the past couple of years, did you sort of come to that analysis on your own, or did you come to that analysis doing research into some of the other people who have written about this stuff in the past?
I think research is a strong word. I spend a lot of time on Twitter, so I do read papers and stuff on there. That's not proper research, but I'm definitely influenced by people that I've, and I'd always try and find the sources of why people are saying what they're saying, look into things a little bit more. So yeah, it's a combination, I think.
Great. All right. Well, Pallavi, thank you so much for being here. A lot of people in the chat are expressing a lot of gratitude to you for taking the stand that you did and saying that you are the kind of calm, measured, intelligent woman that the Green Party should be sorry to have kicked out.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. You're welcome to stick around until the end if you'd like, but no worries if you can't.
Okay.
Okay, next we will have the Honorable Dr. Jocelynne A. Scutt, who is a barrister and human rights lawyer practicing in London and qualified to practice in Australia. Her books include, among others, the Women's Voices, Women's Lives series of some 12 volumes, including Singular Women, Reclaiming Spinsterhood, and Taking a Stand, Women in Politics and Society, plus The Incredible Woman, Power and Sexual Politics, which has 2 volumes, The Sexual Gerrymander, Women and the Economics of Power, Women and Magna Carta, A Treaty for Rights or Wrongs, Beauty, Women's Bodies and the Law, Performances in Plastic, Wage Rage for Equal Pay, Australia's Long, Long Struggle, and most recently, the collections Women, Law and Culture, Conformity, Contradiction and Conflict, and Women, Power and Autonomy, Rights, Respect and Representation in Law and Society, which is scheduled to be published in just a few days on the 12th of November. Her next collection, Finance, Feminism, and Fortune, Living in a Monetarized World, is currently considering abstracts. So anyone with an idea for a chapter, please be in touch. Her films include The Incredible Woman, A Green Shell Necklace, both with Karen Buzinski Lee, and Covered, a DVD installation in 3 streams, debating the scarf, romancing the veil, and the contradictions of cover. It is such an honor and pleasure to welcome you, Dr. Scutt. I hand the mic over to you.
Thank you very much, Cara. Appreciated. Well, I've come on to talk about abortion rights and the fact that, amongst other things, in this country, the United Kingdom, I think many women believe that abortion is legal and therefore there are no problems relating to it. And that, of course, is contrary to the actual position. In England and Wales, although abortion is legal under the 1967 Act, it's also rendered illegal and still criminal if it doesn't take place in accordance with the provisions of that Act, which are restrictive and which are directly sex discriminatory. There's also, of course, provisions in the 1861 Offences Against the Person Act, which make abortion illegal, and that act still exists. And what women also do not know is that if they undergo an abortion, a termination of pregnancy, then a report is made on this to the Chief Medical Officer, either in England or in Wales, depending on which country it is, and so that there's a permanent record of the fact that the woman has had the abortion. And as I've said, it's directly discriminatory because it's necessary, first of all, to have the abortion to be legal. It must be carried out under that 1967 Act. Secondly, 2 doctors have to effectively approve the abortion, and there's no medical operation that men undergo where the approval of 2 medical practitioners is necessary. So it's clearly directly discriminatory on the ground of sex. There's no question about that. And one of the problems in this area is that rather than being regarded as a health matter and as health treatment, abortion is in the category of being regarded as a matter that can be interfered with effectively on religious grounds. That's more prominently the case in the United States, and we know that from history and from contemporary reports as to what is happening in the United States. And the last but one books you referenced, Cara, in Women, Power and Autonomy, Rights, Respect and Representation in Law and Society. The issue of abortion is one of the chapters that I've written for that book. And the reason that I wrote it is because one really has to look at this issue on a global basis. And if we think about Western countries, the United States, Canada, Australia, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and this country, abortion is treated, as I said, differently from male operations. There's no male operation that's regarded in the same way. There's this morality that attaches to it, and there's the idea that women somehow are seen as illegitimate in terms of making decisions about our own health matters and about our own bodies. I think one of the elements here is that if one terminates a pregnancy, then there's a chance that what's being terminated is a potential male human being. And because male human beings who exist are regarded as important and as real, as human beings who count, and as women are not counted as human beings who matter, then I think this is central to the issue about abortion, because an abortion can be aborting a potential male human being whose rights are transcendent over women's rights. But there are other issues that I could go into in this regard. I mean, if one looks at Dobbs and Jackson, the case that repealed or overturned Roe and Wade. Roe and Wade's 1973, as we know, and Dobbs and Jackson is 2022. It may be of interest to people in this country, in the United Kingdom rather, that the judge who wrote that principal judgment, the majority judgment in Dobbs and Jackson, refers, amongst other matters, to Chief Justice Hale, who was a Chief Justice in this country. I'm sure most people, the name will be familiar, because Chief Justice Hale is revered in legal circles still, although his book came out in 1636 and was written the century before. He is the judge who said that rape in marriage is not a crime because women consent to marriage, and therefore that consent somehow embodies real consent to whatever happens in sexual terms within that marriage. He also was the last judge to sit on a trial for witches in this country, in England, where the witches went to the were hanged because they were found to be witches. And he actually said in that case, or in his book, that he knew that witches were real because there they were in his court being found guilty. And anyway, the Bible said that witches were real. And he is a principal reference in Dobbs and Jackson. So one can see that the scholarship of Dobbs and Jackson, apart from the legal principles that are enunciated there, the scholarship is certainly wanting, and the judgment itself is, one might say quite bluntly, misogynist, because it does not recognise women as human beings with the capacity to make decisions for ourselves and the ability to determine whether we want to be mothers or not. And if a woman makes a determination that she is ill prepared to be a mother at the time that she is pregnant, then that determination should be respected. But of course, it's not in Dobbs and Jackson. And there are other, there are consequences of that all over the United States now. Certain states are passing extraordinarily retributive laws. Other states are going the other way and endeavouring to ensure that women can, if they're out of state, can come into that state to gain a termination of pregnancy. But then the states from which they are coming are characterising that activity as being criminal in itself, because they're passing across state lines in order to have that operation conducted on themselves. But perhaps there are issues that you would like to raise, Cara, in accordance with this whole question of women's rights. And it's not, in my opinion, the right to choose effectively. I've always taken issue with that way of characterising it, because in my view, if a woman has an abortion, if she terminates pregnancy, it is because she has no other choice. If she had some other choice, she would take the other choice and she wouldn't do the termination or the abortion. So I think that to characterise this operation as a question of choice is really misunderstanding the position that women are in when they need to seek an abortion, because they need to seek an abortion because that is the only avenue that they can take in the circumstances that they face at that time.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Yeah, it's really interesting because I definitely have always seen the ability to terminate a pregnancy as a women's human right. And it's interesting to me that you point out Justice Alito's reliance on Judge Hale, because one of the things that stuck out to me in Dobbs and Jackson is that, you know, the justices had to consider the doctrine of stare decisis, which is whether to overturn a long-standing precedent, as you well know. And one of the factors the justices considered is whether any group of people had come to rely on the prior decision. And Justice Alito and the majority finds that no group of people had come to rely on Roe v. Wade. Now, whatever you think of abortion, you can only reach that decision if you don't think that women are people, if you don't think that women are full autonomous human beings. I don't know if you want to reflect on that at all.
Well, I think that you've hit the nail on the head, if I may, with respect, say that, because it is clear that women are still not regarded as human. I mean, if I can digress into another area that's also exercising my mind at the moment because of the issue about this Mr. Epstein and so forth. I mean, there's a really good book about this, The Lasting Harm, and it's on the trial of Jocelynne Maxwell. Now, when you read that book, and I really advise everybody, it's an excellent book to read. What comes across so clearly is that men do not see us as equal to them. I mean, I know I sound really naive in saying this, and I know that we all know this, but to read this book, the message comes through so clearly. We do not count. Those little girls, those young women, that those men used and abused in the most egregious way. They were young women who had aspirations. One wanted to be an artist, and the thought that there was a philanthropist that would put her exhibition on in New York was miraculous. She believed it. She was told by Jocelynne Maxwell, here's this philanthropist. Or somebody, she wanted to go to university, and Epstein says to her, oh, now what about UCLA? Here's this girl. No one in her family's been to university before, and here's this philanthropist, she's been told by Jocelynne Maxwell. What about UCLA? It's like a miracle. And they believed that this philanthropist was taking them seriously. They believed that their aspirations would be honored. And then, of course, that was not the case. And as I've said, the message comes through so clearly. They didn't matter. They did not count. And those men could only do what they did to them was because they were not seen as equal to them. They were not seen as human. And that's what comes through in Alito's judgment, in Dobbs and Jackson. We do not matter. We do not count. Women are not equal. And whatever we think about our status, however much we've argued and campaigned and gained, and all the women before us, we still are not equal. We still are the other. And the abortion debate illustrates it so clearly.
Yeah. And so we should emphasize also that reproductive integrity is grounded in one of the articles of the Declaration. I believe the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights. I believe it's Article 3. It could be Article 2. I wanted to raise one more thing with you, which sort of circles back to the question of are women female, which is this. The Democrats put forth a proposal in 2022, excuse me, to codify Roe v. Wade and to make it national law in statute, in federal statute. And there was a debate when the bill went to the Senate Judiciary Committee. There was a woman who was there to testify in support of codifying Roe v. Wade. And she said during her testimony the phrase, people with the capacity for pregnancy. And there's a man on the Senate Judiciary Committee who's a very conservative anti-abortion senator named Seth Hawley. I might be getting his name wrong. Senator Hawley, Josh Hawley, that's his name. And he picked up on that language and he said, by people with the capacity for pregnant. Remember, this man is a conservative. He's a staunch Republican anti-abortion. And he said, what do you mean by people with the capacity for pregnancy? Do you mean women? And she couldn't answer the question. She said, I mean, so, you know, some cisgender women can get pregnant, some trans men can get pregnant, some non-binary people can get pregnant. And then he said, so do you mean that this is not a women's rights issue? And she had no response other than to accuse him of transphobia. And so just like that, the Democrats essentially handed conservative anti-abortion Republicans the talking point that abortion is not a women's rights issue. Do you have any thoughts on that?
One can raise many thoughts. I mean, I think that we do have to be really very clear about language, and there can't be any quibble with the fact that A, women are the human beings who have the capacity for pregnancy. B, the decision to terminate a pregnancy is a decision that is up to the human beings who happen to be women, and being women is crucial to this. I think that one of the problems in this area when it goes to the whole question of women's health is that we come to a nonsense situation if we're talking about the fact that it was illustrated so well in Canada recently, where there was an inquiry into stillbirths and miscarriages, and the woman who was actually the one who was tasked with leading this issue actually put ahead as the very first issue that she raised was that men who identify as women should be included in this debate. Now, it's absolutely nonsensical because there's no way that a man can, of course, become pregnant. It doesn't matter how they identify, what they want to call themselves, how they want to say they're constructed. The reality is they cannot have children. And the women who were involved in that inquiry, who had suffered miscarriage, who had suffered stillbirth, were absolutely affronted, as they should be, at the notion that the principal issue that was the first that was raised was the issue about men who identify as women should be able to be included in the debate and the discussion. And I mean, it's so unmindful of women's, not only women's biology, but of women's rights to be sensitive human beings and to have their issues taken seriously. Because many women who suffer stillbirth, of course, they're devastated by it. They're emotionally traumatized by what's happened to them. And to put some other issue that's really got nothing to do with them as the first priority, understandably, they are affronted, but they're also being negated. And again, they're being treated as non-human. You see, if somebody wants to say people can become pregnant, then what they're doing is negating the whole issue of our reality as female human beings. And our reality as female human beings needs to be affirmed again and again and again, because in so many other ways, that reality is tugged from under our feet, like a rug being tugged from under our feet. And it's happening in this area, which really goes to the heart and the soul of who you are as a human being and as a woman. So I think we need to reclaim the language, but I think it's very, very difficult. I mean, I'm originally from Australia, and I have to say that they're indoctrinated down there. And the people who hold positions, for example, the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, all the human rights commissions, the equal opportunity commissions there are infiltrated, are dominated by this issue. And there's no one in those positions who's really representing women. I just really am bemused as to why it is. I think part of the reason in Australia is that postmodernism took absolute hold, and it's still entrenched down there to a certain degree, much more than in this country.
Sal Grover visited Washington, D.C., and we walked through the Senate office buildings asking senators to vote yes on a bill to protect women's sports in America. And of course, not one of them did. All right, so with that, let's see if Sue and Pallavi can rejoin. Great. So Dr. Scutt was not here for Sue's presentation or for Pallavi's presentation because she was out canvassing. But I want to give both Sue and Pallavi an opportunity to maybe address what Dr. Scutt brought to the discussion if you'd like to. And I don't see any questions in the Q&A. Anyone is welcome to put a question in the Q&A where I am much more likely to see it than if it is in the chat. Sue, let's start with you. Do you have any reactions or anything that came to mind while Pallavi was talking that you'd like to address?
No, no, I found both very, very interesting and very informative. There's only one comment I could make, and I didn't put that in my piece. But if you see now population statistics, you'll find a lot of people, right wingers, will then add another statistic, which is the number of children which are aborted in the world. And that is a very considerable number. So this sort of has been part of this. Oh well, we've got to get the population up again. We've got to have countries where the population is increasing. They can't possibly go down. So if we take a figure, and it's usually something like 30% plus, and we stopped abortion, we'd have 30% plus births immediately. Okay. So we've got to watch out for that one very clearly because it's a real figure. There's an awful lot of women getting pregnant and they are aborting 30% plus of them. And so that's a very obvious sort of cause for many of these people to be saying that's why we should shut down abortion.
Yeah.
Because the human race is in trouble because the evil women aren't having enough of these children, bringing them and actually having them born.
Yeah. So I want to give Dr. Scutt an opportunity to respond to that if she'd like. There's also a question in the Q&A, which is, where are you from? Which I understand you're originally from Australia, and these days you practice in the UK and have the ability to practice in Australia.
That's correct, yes. I mean, I suppose that there are a number of issues here, aren't there? It's that if a woman seeks termination of pregnancy for economic reasons, and interestingly, there's an Australian case that does recognise that economic reasons can drive the request or the engagement for abortion, and that can be a legitimate position. That case was decided in Australia, gosh, in about the 1990s. I think we need to ask then, why are women in an economic position where an abortion is required. And part of it, of course, is unequal pay. It's inappropriate or unmanageable issues relating to childcare. And you see, there's just been a huge scandal in Australia where numerous, I'm afraid, men who have been working in the childcare industry are being prosecuted and convicted of child sexual abuse in the childcare industry. Well, therefore, if you're a woman who hasn't had children, you must be terribly upset and concerned and worried about sending your children off to a childcare centre. It's all been privatised, where the potential for the child being sexually abused is real. I mean, we know the potential for child sexual abuse within the home is real too. But if there's not the proper support, if there's not equal pay, if there's not childcare, if there's not the proper supports for women to have children, well, then it's inevitable that some women are going to seek abortion for economic reasons. Another element is rape. If you've been raped in marriage, then you may require abortion, or if you're raped outside marriage, for example, too. And then there's also the issue of particular circumstances, specific circumstances that may drive this. Because one of the problems in the United Kingdom was that when COVID came about, and it would have been true in every country, and there were lockdowns, what did women do then if they were pregnant and they wanted to put an end to the pregnancy? What did women do then, or young girls do, if they were being subjected to sexual abuse at home? They'd become pregnant for that reason, and then they need an abortion. And it was extraordinarily difficult during that COVID time. And that's an issue that has been raised here in the United Kingdom, because women were being prosecuted for exercising the right to abortion, but beyond the 24 weeks that's in the Abortion Act of 1967.
Okay.
There's now.
I'm sorry. That's okay. No, that's great. We were going to have to end at 1/2 the
Yes.
hour. Last question
Sorry.
is, that's okay. That's okay. For Pallavi, could you speak to, are you now an independent counselor? How's it going to be an independent? And if you want to say a few quick words to wrap up, that'll be great. And then I will conclude.
Sure. Yeah. So I am sitting as an independent counsellor and I'm loving it. Luckily, I have a lot of independent colleagues as well. We cover the whole spectrum of political kind of things. I speak to everyone in the council, right across every single party, and I make common ground on issues that I care about, and I was just really enjoying it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you for a really wonderful program today. We have women-only breakout rooms, which you can join at the link that's being provided in the breakout rooms. In the chat. I believe Joe posted the link. If you wouldn't mind posting the link again, that would be great. To help support these webinars, please donate to WDI. Please join if you'd like. You can find information about all of that at the website, womensdeclaration.com, and you're welcome to become a member. Together, we can fight for women's sex-based rights internationally. If you've not already registered for this series, you can do so via Zoom. After registering, you'll receive a confirmation email containing information about joining the webinar. It's not easy.